Laws are meant to create order, protect people, and keep society running smoothly. But sometimes the legal system leaves behind rules that feel more like punchlines than policies. Scattered across the United States are laws so unusual, so oddly specific, that it's hard to believe they were ever taken seriously, yet they remain technically active today. Some of these laws were born from local customs, outdated concerns, or one-off incidents that lawmakers tried to prevent from happening again. Over time, those concerns faded, but the laws stuck around, tucked into dusty legal codes, mostly forgotten, until now. This countdown explores 5 bizarre laws that are still legally valid across America. From rules about giraffes and ice cream to behavior bans that contradict common sense, each of these reveals something strange about how society once functioned, and, in some cases, still does. Let's begin with number 5. In Georgia, it's illegal to tie a giraffe to a telephone pole. In the state of Georgia, there is a law that forbids tying a giraffe to a telephone pole or a street lamp. Now, let's be honest. Most people will go their entire lives without owning a giraffe, let alone needing to tie one to public infrastructure. So where did this law come from? To understand it, you have to go back to the era of traveling circuses, the late 1800s to early 1900s. Back then, circuses would tour the country, rolling into small towns with large caravans and exotic animals. Elephants, lions, and yes, giraffes were part of the show. And while the circus was in town, those animals had to be kept somewhere. Often, handlers would tie them to whatever was available: fences, signs, posts, and yes, even telephone poles. That's where the problem started. Public utility structures like telephone poles weren't designed to support the weight or movement of a 2,600-pound giraffe. If the animal pulled too hard or tried to walk off, it could damage the pole, knock down power lines, or create dangerous situations in the street. So in response, some localities, including places in Georgia, passed laws that prohibited tying exotic animals, particularly giraffes, to public fixtures. It's a specific solution to a very specific problem from a very specific time. And yet the law was never repealed. Today, it stands as a legal relic. You can legally own a giraffe in some parts of the US with proper permits. Just don't tie it to a telephone pole in Georgia. That's still technically against the law. Next, in Alabama, it's illegal to put ice cream in your back pocket. On its surface, this one sounds like a prank or a joke. In Alabama, there is a law that makes it illegal to carry an ice cream cone in your back pocket. But believe it or not, this law had a very clever and very shady origin. Back in the 19th century, horse theft was a serious crime, often punishable by jail time or even hanging in some areas. But some criminals figured out a loophole. Instead of directly stealing a horse, they would lead the horse away. No rope, no force, just a tempting trail of treats. And here's where it gets bizarre. Some thieves discovered that by placing a cone of ice cream in their back pocket, they could lure a horse to follow them, thinking there was food involved. It sounds absurd, but horses are curious and food-motivated animals. If the thief kept walking, the horse would follow, and technically, they hadn't stolen it. The horse just wandered off. Lawmakers caught on to this strange tactic and passed laws banning the act of placing ice cream in your back pocket. Not because of hygiene or littering, but to prevent this creative form of theft. The law remains on the books in Alabama and in a few other states. Of course, today it's rarely, if ever, enforced. Not many people are walking around with cones in their pants. But it's a fascinating example of how criminal behavior can evolve, and how laws often have to get oddly specific to keep up. And you gotta wonder, what poor soul was the first to get caught? Imagine being in court like, "Yes, Your Honor, I had a scoop of vanilla in my jeans. I regret everything." Coming up next, in Alaska, it's illegal to be drunk in a bar. Yes, you heard that correctly. In Alaska, there is a law that makes it illegal to be visibly drunk inside a bar. Now, this law seems completely contradictory. After all, bars exist so people can consume alcohol in a legal, social setting. So how can you get in trouble for doing exactly what the space is designed for? Here's how it works. The law doesn't punish people simply for drinking. What it targets is visible intoxication, meaning if you appear obviously drunk, you're supposed to be removed from the premises. That means slurred speech, stumbling, or acting in a way that draws attention for the wrong reasons. The law is technically enforced through Alaska's Alcoholic Beverage Control Board, which holds bar owners and bartenders responsible for serving people past the point of intoxication. The idea is to prevent over-serving, avoid liability, and reduce alcohol-related incidents, especially in areas where alcohol abuse is a serious issue. But here's where things get murky. How do you determine when someone is too drunk? What if someone is just naturally loud? What if they're tired or acting silly, but haven't actually had much to drink? Enforcement is subjective, which has made this law controversial and more than a little strange. So if you're planning a trip to Alaska and a night out at the local pub, just remember, have a good time, but don't look like you're having too much of a good time. Next, we head west, and things get even stranger. Ohio. It's illegal to get a fish drunk. Now we're diving underwater, literally, for one of the most absurd laws still in effect. This one raises more questions than answers. In the state of Ohio, it is illegal to get a fish drunk. At first, this law sounds like the setup for a joke. Who's out here serving cocktails to goldfish? But the law is real, and it actually appears in Ohio's legal code. To understand this one, we have to think about the time period it likely came from. The early 20th century, when laws around animal cruelty were just starting to form. There was growing awareness of the need to treat animals humanely, and legislators began to address not just physical abuse, but also unusual forms of mistreatment. So why a fish? There's some speculation that this law came about due to people, possibly children or pranksters, pouring alcohol into fish tanks or local streams just to see what would happen. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was cruelty. Either way, the result was harmful to the animals, and lawmakers decided to put it to a stop. Of course, no one's going around spiking fish bowls today, but the law remains, never officially removed, and still technically enforceable. So the next time you're fishing in Ohio, remember, bait, hooks, tackle, legal, martinis for the trout, that's a crime. And finally, let's move on to the strangest law of them all. Arizona, donkeys can't sleep in bathtubs. This one sounds made up, but it's not. In Arizona, it's illegal for a donkey to sleep in a bathtub. But behind this odd sentence is a surprisingly chaotic and very real event, one that lawmakers decided should never happen again. As weird as it sounds, this law was a direct response to a bizarre chain of events that happened in the 1920s. Here's what happened. Back in the 1920s, a rancher had a donkey that loved lounging in an old bathtub on his property. All was fine until a nearby dam broke. Floodwaters rushed in, picked up the bathtub and the sleeping donkey inside, and carried it miles away. Took a whole rescue crew and a lot of effort to save that poor donkey. After that mess, officials decided no more donkeys in bathtubs, ever. They made it a law, and weirdly enough, that law stuck around. Even now, it's still technically illegal for a donkey to nap in a tub in parts of Arizona. So if you've got a donkey in a bathtub, keep them apart, just to be safe. As silly as they sound, every one of these laws was created for a reason, even if that reason feels totally ridiculous now. Some were about safety, some were about protecting animals, and some were just trying to stop people from getting too clever with their crimes. But the funny part? Nobody ever bothered to remove these laws, so they're still sitting there, hidden in state rule books, like little leftovers from a much weirder time. And who knows, maybe in 100 years, people will look back at our laws and think we were the strange ones. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review. Until next time, stay curious and keep it legal, mostly.